When people walked into our house, they always paused. It wasn't because of the open floor plan or the clean mid-century furniture. It was the walls. Every inch of them was covered in canvases. Oil, acrylic, charcoal studies. Big pieces, raw and stretched. Nothing framed, nothing boxed in. Just work. Mine. It wasn't a home so much as it was a gallery we lived inside. That was her idea, not mine. Casey said my art deserved space to breathe. She said she liked waking up every day surrounded by things I'd made. It's like living inside your brain, she told me once, when we were still newlyweds and couldn't stop touching each other. At the time, it sounded romantic. Now I think about that line a lot. Because living inside someone's brain isn't always beautiful. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it smells like turpentine and unwashed brushes and resentment that doesn't dry right. I met Casey back in 2012 at a gallery in Santa Fe. I was showing a series called Fault Lines. 7 large canvases, all painted with palette knives. Big, violent strokes. Texture heavy. People said they looked like aerial views of cities after earthquakes. Casey was a visitor, not a buyer. But she stood in front of the third piece, Fault Line 3, Sedgwick Collapse, for almost 20 minutes without moving. I watched her from across the room. She was wearing all black and white Converse. She looked like someone who didn't flinch. When she finally turned and caught me watching her, she smiled. I used to date someone who painted like this, she said. But yours doesn't feel like imitation. That's how it started. She moved in 6 months later. We got married 2 years after that. She didn't paint, not seriously, but she loved being around it. She called herself a studio wife. She set up my spaces, organized my brushes by type, built a catalog of my work, designed the website, pitched new series ideas over breakfast. Sometimes I felt like she was the business and I was the product. And I didn't mind it, not back then, because having someone believe in you is a powerful drug. About a year ago, we turned the house into what she called a permanent experience space. It meant no more blank walls. She took down the prints and family photos and hung up older pieces of mine in their place. She even had tiny cards printed with fake titles and installation dates, like it was a museum. I went along with it, mostly because I didn't have the energy to argue anymore. Sales had slowed. I hadn't picked up a brush in 6 months. I blamed the market. She blamed the move from LA to Seattle. We both avoided blaming each other. At night, we still kissed before bed. We still said, love you, like a habit, like flossing. But it didn't feel like a marriage anymore. It felt like an archive. I was gone for 5 days in July. Stayed with my brother in Boise while we worked on a joint mural for a public space outside the college. I came back late on a Sunday night. Casey was asleep. The house was dark except for the hallway light. I walked through, heading toward the kitchen to get water. That's when I noticed it. A new canvas, hung on the wall outside my studio. 3 by 4 feet. Abstract. Mixed media. Gray background. Orange slashes. Angular. Unframed. Not mine. At first, I thought maybe she'd bought something from a local gallery. She used to do that sometimes, support smaller artists, swap pieces. But this one wasn't signed. And the composition felt off. Not bad, but familiar. The way the lines converged toward the lower right corner. The way the paint dragged. It looked like someone trying to do me, but with more chaos. Like someone remembered how I used to work, but hadn't studied it closely in a while. I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned off the hallway light and went to bed. She stirred as I climbed in. You're back, she mumbled. I am. Good trip. It was fine. She reached for my hand, but didn't open her eyes. Missed you, she said. I didn't answer. The next morning, over coffee, I asked casually, where'd the new hallway piece come from? She took a sip before answering. Oh, that. I bought it from a pop-up in Tacoma while you were gone. Local artist? Yeah, I think so. It was unsigned. But I liked the energy. You don't usually go for unsigned. She shrugged. Sometimes you just feel a piece. I nodded. Said nothing. Didn't push. But something had shifted. Because now there was a ghost in the gallery. Not the painting. Not the artist. The memory. Later that night, I dug through an old Dropbox folder labeled Early Days. It was a backup from my original studio drive in Santa Fe, hundreds of image files and process videos. I clicked through them slowly, looking, waiting, and then I found it. A piece called Test Geometry 2, done in 2011. The composition was nearly identical to the hallway painting. Same pull. Same arc. Even the palette was close. except I'd used green instead of orange. Then I remembered the guy who'd been in Casey's life back then. Colin. He'd come to 2 of my shows, took photos, asked me about brushes and gesso layering. He wasn't subtle about it. Called himself a technical learner. I hadn't thought about him in years. But now I couldn't stop thinking about him. That night, I asked Casey again, "Did you say the painting in the hall was from a Tacoma artist?" She nodded. "Do you remember their name?" She shook her head. "No. I told you, it was a pop-up. Cash sale. No receipts." I stared at her. She looked me in the eye. Didn't blink. Didn't flinch. And that's when I knew. It wasn't a found painting. It was a planted one. And I was living inside someone else's gallery now. I didn't bring it up again for a while. The hallway painting stayed on the wall. She walked past it every day. I noticed she'd glance at it sometimes while brushing her teeth or coming out of the shower. She didn't linger on it. But she didn't ignore it, either. It was there, like a bruise we both pretended wasn't forming. I started going through my old work in the garage, pulled out rolled canvases from the early Santa Fe years. I was looking for something specific, something Colin had commented on. Back then, he had a habit of showing up at events and making himself known. Not rude, but insistent. He'd been a student when we met, technically a peer, but younger, eager. The kind of guy who watched your brush hand more than the finished canvas. Said things like, "I'm not interested in style, just structure." But Colin didn't have his own style. He copied. Not exactly. Not stroke for stroke. But enough. He'd lift mood. Color theory. Movement. I didn't mind at first. It happens. Everyone starts somewhere. But Casey once told me she found his work eerily similar to mine. That was in 2013. She said it after a gallery opening in Albuquerque, when Colin showed up uninvited and gave her a zine of his experimental abstractions. She flipped through it in the car and muttered, "He's basically cloning you." I remember laughing. Now I wasn't laughing. Because the hallway painting wasn't just similar. It was echo. I texted Paul, an old friend from the Santa Fe gallery circuit, and asked if he'd heard anything about Colin lately. He replied an hour later. "Colin Bishop? Yeah, man. Blew up out of nowhere. Had a feature in Art Forum last year. NYC based now. You two ever patch things up?" Patch what up? I stared at the message for a while. We'd never fought. Not officially. But I guess other people had seen the tension. Maybe they assumed there was more behind it. Maybe there was. I typed back. Didn't know we were torn. He didn't reply. That night, after Casey fell asleep, I opened her college art box. It was still in the linen closet under a pile of scarves and Christmas cards. I hadn't touched it in years. I wasn't even sure if she still remembered it was there. Inside were sketchbooks, old paints, brushes too stiff to salvage, a cracked palette, torn life-drawing pages from figure studies, photos of her in dorm rooms, on the quad, at gallery crawls. Her hair was longer back then, always tied in a knot. At the bottom, tucked inside a manila folder, was a stack of letters. Most were unimportant, syllabi, handwritten notes, grocery lists. But in the middle was a folded, paint-smudged envelope. No stamp, just a name. Casey. Inside was a single page, torn from a sketch pad. Heavy texture, the kind art students use for charcoal or pastel. The handwriting was familiar. I read it twice. "I know you say it's just your job to help him, that he's your project, but I also know how you look at me when he's not around. Don't pretend this isn't real. I feel it in every brush stroke. One day, we'll have our own show. Just us. No ghosts." See, it wasn't signed, but I didn't need it to be. I recognized the loop in the sea. Colin. She kept it. All these years. And now there was a new painting in the hallway. Unsigned. Matching his style. Dropped in while I was gone. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I started painting again. Not out of inspiration, out of calculation. She'd been asking me to produce something new for months. Now I gave her what she wanted. I painted 5 pieces in 7 days. All abstract, all different from my previous work. I used ink this time. Faster strokes. High contrast. She loved them. Started curating again. Pulled pieces off the walls. Rearranged rooms. Turned the dining space into a viewing gallery. "You're back," she said, laying one canvas on the floor and tilting her head at it. "This is the you I met." I didn't answer. I just kept painting, because I had a plan now, and she was walking right into it. I waited another week. Then I suggested an idea. What if we did an anniversary show? She looked up from her laptop. "You mean like a gallery night?" "Yeah, just close friends. People from your circle, Mine. Put our favorites up. Make it about us. 10 years. She smiled, almost shy. You want to do that? I nodded. You've always said the house is a gallery. Why not make it official? She thought about it, then agreed. We picked a date. 2 weeks out. I created mock-ups of the room layout. Printed fake placards for each piece. Invited our old friends from New Mexico. She handled the local guests. I saw her texting someone a lot, but I didn't ask who. I didn't need to, because I'd already built the final piece of the exhibit. One she didn't know about, and wouldn't until it was too late. The guest list was tighter than I expected. Casey trimmed it down to 24. She said anything more would feel like a spectacle. I wanted intimate, she said. So people actually see the work, not just drink wine and take selfies. I nodded. She printed real invitations. Thick cardstock. Clean design. Our initials and the number 10 in the middle. She even named the event, A Decade of Color. I didn't object. Let her build the stage. I just needed her to walk into it. The week leading up to the show, we cleaned the entire house. Every room, every surface. I vacuumed behind shelves I hadn't moved in years. She repainted one wall in the living room because she said the light didn't hit it right. We argued once about where to hang a piece I'd done in 2015. A moody oil, she used to say, was too dark. Now she insisted it was part of the journey. I let her win. She was glowing that whole week. Woke up earlier than usual. Played music while arranging things. Sent texts with smiley faces and exclamation points. I watched her carefully. When she passed by the hallway painting, the unsigned one, she didn't touch it. Didn't comment. Just let it hang there like it had always belonged. That was the only part of the house she didn't adjust, which told me everything I needed to know. The night before the show, I finished installing the final piece. It looked like a normal abstract canvas at first glance. Same size as the others, 36 by 48. Framed. Acrylic and charcoal. Dominant colors, slate, rust, deep green. The details were layered. Subtle. In the top right corner, I had embedded a faint handwritten letter. The strokes mimicked dry brush technique, so you couldn't read it unless you were up close. It was the same letter I found in her college art box. Copied word for word. I didn't sign it. Didn't label it. Just gave it a card that read, Untitled, Mixed Media, 2023. She walked past it twice the morning of the show and said nothing. But I saw the way her eyes stuck on it. Not for long. Just a flicker of hesitation. A pause in motion. Then she kept walking. The guests arrived slowly. First Paul and his partner from New Mexico. Then a couple of Casey's old co-workers from the art nonprofit. A few local artists she'd become friendly with. One of them brought a bottle of Merlot in a paper bag. Someone else brought cheese. It wasn't formal, but it wasn't casual either. People walked through the rooms quietly. Studied the walls. Asked questions. Nodded. I stood mostly by the kitchen. Didn't circulate much. Let her be the hostess. She was in her element, talking about process, colors, mood. Some guests asked her which pieces were her favorites, and she said, honestly, the newer ones. They feel freer. That line stuck with me. Freer. Like someone just let go of something. Or someone. About an hour into the evening, he showed up. Colin. He was taller than I remembered. Same jawline, same haircut. Clean button-down, fitted blazer, thin silver ring on his right hand. He walked in like he'd been here before. Casey's entire body shifted when she saw him. Not dramatically, just enough. Her posture changed. Her hand went to her neck. She smiled. Wide, too wide, and said, You made it. He nodded, hugged her briefly, and said, Wouldn't miss it. She introduced him as an old college friend. Some guests nodded, uninterested. Paul raised an eyebrow. Said nothing. I walked up slowly and shook his hand. Firm grip. Neutral smile. Eric, I said. Colin, he replied. Big fan of your work. I smiled back. I've heard that. We didn't speak again for 30 minutes. But he walked through every room and stopped in the hallway. He stood in front of the unsigned painting for a full minute. Didn't touch it. Didn't smile. Just stood there. Then moved on. When he passed me in the kitchen later, he said, That one's interesting. I nodded. Yeah. I've been meaning to ask, did you paint it? He blinked. Paused. Casey walked into the room behind him, holding a glass of white wine. He glanced at her. She stopped walking. He turned back to me. Smiled. No, he said. Just familiar brushwork. Then he walked away. At 9:15, I made the announcement. Thanks for being here, I said, raising my glass in the dining room. 10 years married. Feels like a lifetime and a blink. Soft laughter. Casey stood beside me, arm hooked through mine. I'm grateful, I said. Not just for Casey, but for everyone here. You've seen the work, you've seen the house. But tonight I wanted to share one last piece. One that's never been shown publicly. She looked up at me, then around the room, then back at me. I gestured toward the living room, where I'd cleared a space in front of the mounted TV. Some of you might not know this, I said, but I've always considered mixed media to include the written word. Sometimes, letters say more than paint. I pressed play. The screen lit up. Zoomed-in texture of the untitled piece. A slow pan across the canvas. Then a fade-in overlay of the letter. Word by word. Scrawled across the screen. The exact language I'd found in her college art box. I know you say it's just your job to help him. The music was low. The room was silent. I watched her face. It stayed frozen. Colin stood near the hallway, wine glass half raised. He didn't move. No one said anything until the final line hit the screen. One day, we'll have our own show. Just us. No ghosts. Then the screen went black. And I said, "Happy anniversary, Casey." No one clapped. No one moved. I let the silence burn, then walked out of the room. No one left immediately after the video. They lingered. Not to comfort her. Not to confront me. But because no one knew what to do. There's a kind of polite paralysis that kicks in at events like that. The room becomes its own hostage. A few guests drifted toward the food table. Some sipped quietly. No one mentioned the video. Not out loud. But everyone had seen it. Everyone had seen her. And him. And the letter. She stood in the hallway for a long time after it ended. Not talking. Not moving. Just staring at the now empty screen like it might explain something she didn't already know. Colin left first. He didn't say goodbye. He just set his wine glass down on a side table and walked toward the front door without making eye contact with anyone. I watched his reflection in the hallway mirror as he passed it. I didn't stop him. Casey didn't either. By 10:30, half the guests had made some excuse and slipped out. The other half left in quiet clusters. No hugs. No goodbyes. Just shoes tapping lightly across the hardwood. Jackets slipping over shoulders. Eyes avoiding both of ours. She never said a word. Not until the last car pulled out of the driveway. "I don't know what you think you proved," she said. It was the first thing she'd said in hours. I was sitting on the couch, glass of water in hand. My back hurt from standing all night. Her voice came from the hallway. Not loud. Not shaking. Just flat. I didn't answer. She walked into the living room. Her arms were crossed. "You humiliated me." I set the glass down. "No," I said. "You did that when you hung his painting in my house." Her face twitched. "That wasn't." "Don't lie," I said. "You don't get to lie now." She didn't speak. "You invited him," I continued, "to our anniversary party. You put his work on our wall. You kept his letter for 15 years. You brought him here while I was out of town." She looked away. "That wasn't his painting," she said quietly. I leaned forward. "You sure?" She swallowed. "Then, it wasn't meant to be permanent." I smiled. "That makes it worse." We didn't sleep in the same room that night. She stayed in the guest room. I left the door unlocked. Not as a gesture, just habit. She didn't come in. I woke up at 6:12 the next morning and checked the hallway. The painting was gone. Taken down. The nail still stuck out of the drywall like a question no one would answer. The rest of the house was untouched. She hadn't touched the food or cleaned the glasses or moved the wine bottles. I found the painting in the garage, leaned face down against the wall, next to a stack of old frames. It still smelled like varnish. I didn't move it. Just left it there. Like she left the truth, half-hidden, technically retrievable, but abandoned anyway. She avoided me for the next 3 days. Didn't leave the house. Barely ate. Walked around like a background character in her own life. I didn't push. I had nothing left to say. On the 4th morning, she sat at the kitchen table while I made coffee. She was wearing the oversized hoodie I bought her in Taos. Her hair was unwashed. Her eyes looked bruised. "Why did you keep the letter?" I asked. She blinked slowly. "I don't know. You don't keep things like that by accident." She stared at the table. Then, "I liked the way he saw me." I nodded. "You mean you liked the way he made you feel?" She didn't answer. "That's fine," I said. "You don't have to apologize for wanting something. But you do have to take responsibility for lying to someone else while you went looking for it." "It wasn't like that." "It's exactly like that." She rubbed her hands over her face. "It was one mistake." "No," I said. "It was years of pretending." You don't get to cheat and then curate the timeline. She looked up. What do you want me to say? Nothing, I said. I just want you to hear yourself. That afternoon, I started removing the artwork. I wrapped each piece in craft paper and labeled the outside. Year, medium, name. By evening, the hallway was bare. I didn't touch the untitled piece, the one with the embedded letter. I left it hanging in the living room. She didn't ask why. She didn't ask anything. That night, I drafted a press release and emailed it to a few galleries. Subject line, Eric Lang, closing the decade. Inside, I announced a new series called Ghost Variations. All works themed around absence. She read the email on her laptop 2 days later and didn't comment. But I saw the screen reflected in her glasses. And I saw the way her jaw clenched when she got to the second paragraph. The one about how the series would be the artist's first solo effort since shedding all collaborative illusions. On Friday morning, she packed a suitcase. No conversation. Just zipped it closed, paused in the doorway, and said, I'm going to my sister's for a while. I nodded. She looked like she was waiting for something. Maybe a fight, maybe forgiveness. I gave her neither. Don't forget the painting in the garage, I said. She didn't respond. Just walked out. I didn't touch her things. I didn't burn anything. Didn't break the wine glasses. Didn't tear the hoodie. This wasn't a movie. This was real life. And in real life, people rot slowly. They don't shatter. They fade. So I let her leave everything the way she left the letter. Hidden, but traceable. And then I made room. Not for her. For the truth. I didn't sleep much that week. After she left, the house didn't feel empty. It felt staged. Like everything had been arranged for a camera I couldn't see. I walked through each room, more like an auditor than a husband. Every canvas, every sketchbook, every file. I made a list of what I had made and what I hadn't, of what was mine and what maybe never had been. Then I started researching, not obsessively, just methodically. Colin Hart. His website was slick. Simple white background, thin serif font, black and white headshot in the About section, him looking over his shoulder at the camera, a paintbrush in one hand. Beneath the photo, abstract realism with an emotional core. I clicked through the portfolio. Most of it looked like noise to the average eye, but not to me. I saw the palette patterns, the layering, the graphite underdrawings used for tone mapping, something I'd started doing in 2011 after a workshop in Santa Fe. The brush marks on his 2016 series were damn near identical to the ones I'd used for my split frame installation in 2014. One piece, Veiled Motion No. 2, even mirrored the exact structure of a triptych I made and never released, something I had scrapped after Casey said it felt too cold. The only difference? My version was still rolled up in a cardboard tube in my studio closet. Hers, or rather, his, had sold for $8,000. That was the first red flag. The second was the signature. Colin didn't sign the front of his work. He branded them, a circular stamp on the back, along with the year and a short handwritten line. The text was always in pencil, faded just enough to feel casual. I'd never seen one in person until I found a resale listing on a niche gallery site. I paid $600 for a used Colin Hart piece titled Holding Pattern, 2018. 3 weeks later, it arrived by courier. I unwrapped it slowly, taking photos as I peeled away the layers. Canvas, frame, paper backing. Then I flipped it, and there it was. The stamp, same circle, same graphite line beneath it. But the handwriting? It wasn't his. It was mine. I knew the way I made the E, tight curve, angled crossbar. I knew the spacing I used between letters. I knew because I'd written the exact same line. Everything moves, even stillness, in my own journal 6 years ago. I flipped through the pages and found it. Same date, same ink color, same phrase, same spacing. He hadn't just copied my style. He had copied my signature process. And somehow, somewhere along the line, he had gotten access to it. That night, I broke into Casey's old hard drive. It wasn't locked. She'd left it in the desk drawer beneath her old sketch pads. I hadn't touched it in years. Inside were folders labeled by year, then by month. Photos of our travels, her projects, screenshots of inspiration boards, and one folder marked, Colin, old stuff. I opened it. Inside were 117 JPGs, scans of old paintings, sketches, color swatches, photos of my work from my early studio days, even one from an unpublished draft of my 2013 zine, Clean Break, which I never released because I didn't think it was good enough. He had copied half of it, almost line for line. But here's the kicker. Some of the file names included notes. Use this tone scale. Ask E about his overlay trick. Layer like his December piece, 2012. It wasn't subtle. It was documentary. And she had saved it all. I sat in the dark for a long time after that. Not sad. Not angry. Just clear. She hadn't just cheated. She'd been feeding him. Feeding him details. Feeding him techniques. Feeding him me. He didn't become a success on his own. He became a success through her. And through me. I wasn't just the husband she betrayed. I was the blueprint they stole from. The work. The style. The substance. The voice. All of it. Repackaged under someone else's name. Marketed as original. And the art world? They ate it up. Because the thief smiled wider. Dressed cleaner. Knew how to talk about emotional movement without ever having to feel anything. I boxed up every piece I thought might be compromised. Everything that predated 2015 went into storage. I changed the locks on the studio. Updated my copyright registrations. Then I started drafting the next show. Not for revenge. Not even for closure. Just to draw a line. The show would be called The Signature. A direct reference. Each piece would mimic one of his, but reassembled, reinterpreted, deconstructed. I'd use the same compositions, but reveal the scaffolding. Show the process behind the illusion. Show what happens when the original decides to speak. I'd sign every piece. Not on the back. Not in pencil. But in full ink. Right across the canvas. I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't letting anyone else pretend. Not her. Not him. Not the people who bought their version of me. I didn't send her an invitation. But I knew she'd come. People always come when they think they're being talked about. And this time, she was right. The show launched on a Thursday night at the Locust Room, a converted textile warehouse near downtown. High ceilings, exposed beams, black paint on the floors, and track lighting positioned like interrogation lamps. I called it The Signature. 21 pieces, each one titled after something I'd found in her folders. Some of the names included: Use this tone scale. Ask E about his overlay trick. Layer like his December piece. Every title was printed in Helvetica on a placard beside the frame, along with a line from one of Colin's artist statements. People didn't get it at first. They walked slowly, whispered to each other, tilted their heads, looking for something to feel. And then someone made the connection. Someone always does. That's how virality works in galleries, not through loud announcements, but through a chain reaction of dawning realization. I saw a man freeze in front of holding pattern, reclaimed. He took out his phone, pulled up Colin's website, and held it side by side. I watched the confusion settle into certainty, then into anger. Not at me, at them. That's when I knew it had worked. Casey walked in around 8:15. She wore a long black coat and no makeup. She stayed near the walls, hands in her pockets, pretending to browse. She knew by the third painting. I could tell from her breathing. She lingered in front of Everything Moves, Even Stillness. The piece had my original triptych layout, the one she called Too Cold in 2014. Only this time, I'd embedded the original journal page under translucent medium, just enough to let the graphite signature peek through. My signature, not his. She turned and met my eyes across the room. I didn't look away. She walked over slowly. Why? She asked. You know why. This is personal. No, I said. This is professional. He made it professional when he used my work. You made it personal when you helped him do it. I didn't think you'd ever find out. I smiled. I did. She bit her lip. You could have just told people. I am. Her eyes dropped to the gallery pamphlet in her hand. On the back was a quote. You can't trademark someone's soul, but you can sign it. Eric Lang. I watched her reread it twice. Then she said the thing I'd been waiting for. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I nodded. Neither did I. But here we are. Colin didn't show up. He probably knew better. Or maybe he sent someone to take photos and report back. Didn't matter. By the following week, 3 art blogs had already picked up the story. One headline read, The Real Signature. Artist accuses rising star of technique theft in subtle takedown show. Another said, Eric Lang's new show quietly dismantles a copycat empire, one brushstroke at a time. Neither piece mentioned Casey. I hadn't told anyone about her. She was the missing link, and I left her out on purpose. She didn't deserve the press, and I didn't need the world to know everything. Just enough. Just the signature. 2 weeks later, she emailed me. No subject line. Just a message. I saw the interviews. I get it now. You were never cold. You were original. I didn't reply. What was I going to say? Thank you? Come back? None of that made sense anymore. Not in the gallery. Not in the house. Not in the hallway where the painting used to hang. I left the wall blank. A single nail in the drywall. Still there. People asked me if I'd replace the piece. Hang something new. I said no. I liked it that way. It wasn't a scar. It was a signature. Subscribe to the channel